Before I start, do not, under any circumstances, try and replicate this repair yourself. I am an untrained retard, but I'm a competent enough retard to try and do this repair in the first place. So with that said, I have a MacBook Pro, I believe mid 2012, second top tier of this generation. And overall, I do use it fairly often, but as you can tell by the title of the video and the warning at the very beginning, my power supply is not in the best of shape. Last night when I was using this, I was having intermittent charging issues for a while, and I thought the power supply itself was going bad, but no. The actual cable coming from the little strain relief here actually shorted out. It shorted out right where you can see this little bit of decolorization and whatnot. Simply what happens that over time the actual little plastic sheathing right here just wore off, and since this is the main voltage and this is the ground is actually wrapped around the cable, and whenever it was bending it was actually causing it to short. So I didn't know it at the time until I was basically done for the day. And when I went to pull this charger off the wall, I noticed it was shorting. I was like, oh shit. So luckily I managed to save my MacBook from shorting out, and apparently the power supply itself still works. It's just that I have to resolder on some new power leads. Now luckily this actual power supply here is fairly easy to understand. The white cable is main power like I said, and the black cable is ground. So all I really need to do is just detach these two cables, reattach new cables, and then attach those new cables to the already working power cable. And here's that main power cable I was talking about. Since the short only happened in the strain relief, the actual cable itself is still completely fine. Now, even though this thing is a third party, I can definitely tell the actual sheathing and the actual cable is starting to get a little more rigor mortis over the years, or at least since I've actually owned it. Now granted, this power supply came out, if the date code is correct, 2012, so this is a fairly old third-party power supply, and in fact it made it all the way to 2022 without it failing up until recently is actually quite surprising. So at least it was a completely built third party, but I wanted to let my local free geek know that these third-party power supplies may have some shorting issues. Alright, so I moved out to the kitchen, so the lighting's going to be a little bit different. So all I'm going to do to actually pull these two cables is I'm just going to desolder this one here and that one right there. That's the two pads for the main power that goes to the laptop. So I'm going to desolder those and come back. Alright, and just like that, they're removed. All it is, I just took the soldering iron, placed the tip on here, let it sit for a bit, and then I used my little pliers here and just pulled them right out. Put a little bit of new solder onto the actual pads. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove a little bit of the little sheathing from the wire I'm going to use, put solder on that, heat this back up, and then just literally shove it in there. And that's really all I need to do to get this thing back up and running. So I'm going to get and do all that off camera because like I said, I really don't want anyone to replicate this, and I need to do something like this off camera because again, I'm not an actual technician. I just want to record something that's quick and easy for me to at least upload. Alright, positive and negative are now fully attached as they should. They're going nowhere. So the next step for me to do is to try and put this thing back together again. Alright, got it back together to where it's more or less safe. So I also put some hot glue at the end right there to stop the two wires from connecting before they do short again. I don't think they will, so next thing to do is strip the wires here and strip the wire here and solder everything together. So I'll go and do that and come back. And just like that, I have fixed the charger, and now I can charge up my laptop and everything works completely fine. So the next step for me to do is to obviously insulate these two things so they don't short. And of course, if I unplug it, it goes right back to battery power. Plug it back in. Give it a couple seconds. It goes right to charging. So I've managed to fix it. So Apple isn't going to get the $80 I was originally thinking of giving them. So I'm going to secure everything up, and that'll be pretty much it for this video. And here is the rebuild power supply. I know I went a little overboard, but it doesn't really matter in the end because, again, I'm going to be more or less babying this thing now. But all that really matters is that it actually still charges the laptop. Now, before you say anything about the heat and whatnot, I am going to be monitoring the heat output of this thing because I do know what this thing is supposed to feel like when it's warming up. If I notice it getting a tad bit more warmer than what I would like, I will think of some type of cooling solution, or eventually just outright buy a $80 power supply from Amazon, not Amazon, but from Apple. But as of right now, I have fixed my old laptop power supply, and now I can actually charge up my MacBook Pro and actually use it. Though the only thing I gotta do to this MacBook Pro now is get a new battery for it, because I believe this thing's still rocking the original battery that came with it. So it's definitely getting old in age, but it actually still survives, or still lasts for like a couple hours, surprisingly enough.